This is a PowerPoint on the Scholomance teachers. Okay, wait a minute. I know I called it the Scholomance teachers. That's not technically what they are. There are 10 cards, of course, because there's Demon Hunter, but 3 of them aren't technically teachers, but there's not really anything better to call them, so that's what I called them. Had to get that out of the way. But first we have Star Student Selena. This card sucks. I mean, it's incredibly slow. It's understated. The effect isn't actually that good. It has a condition, which is Outcast, and there's no tribe. I'm not too sure what they were going for this card. They actually, super power crept this card with Jade Telegram in Caverns of Time. It's a 3-mana spell that has this exact effect, but it summons a Jade Golem instead of giving you a minion. However, getting a Jade Golem is, even if it's not as much stats as a 4-3, it's usually going to be better, especially because that card was 3 mana. So it would basically be, you either get a 1-1, you get 2-2, 3-3, 4-4, etc. because of how Jade's work. After a certain point, it just became significantly better than Selena, and that card still saw no play in Wild. It was quite good in Twist, of course, but man, I mean, Selena's just a card of all time. If you really want to play, an effect like this, you just play Glide. It's more beneficial to glide your opponent's entire hand into their deck than to only have one card. So it's a bit rough that Selena is just so bad. There's nothing positive to say about this card. It's truly terrible. Then we have Forest Warden Omu. Omu is weird. It was experimented with a lot, and I mean a lot, while it was in Standard. It never really caught on more than just experimentation. People were trying it over and over again. It wasn't that great. There's just better ways to cheat mana that existed in Standard. You had, you would either just not care about the anything from Omu, to be honest, because you would just play, your Clown Druid and just play it like that, and Omu didn't help really for that deck. Or you have, your Celestial Alignment Druid, which came out in Forged in the Barrens, and again, better than Omu. Or you had Guff, which came out in Alterac Valley, which, again, better than Omu. Omu just couldn't really do anything. You were supposed to be able to, play Omu, play Germination on it, and then, have, infinite mana or something, but it just didn't work. There's just no way to make it work. It's kind of awkward. It's hard to describe just how little Omu actually did when you played any decks like that. You're just better off doing anything else at the time. I might be wrong. I will admittedly say that I can't remember if Omu really did see any play anywhere during, Scholomance, but I know for a fact it just didn't see play in, obviously post-Forge in the Barrens, post-Alterac Valley, stuff like that. Just didn't see any play there, but I could be wrong about Scholomance Academy. I'm just not remembering it at all. If I am, tell me down below, but I'm pretty positive it didn't see play, mainly because it was just, the Demon Hunter show during Scholomance. I don't think Druid was really that good. It would have, if it were, it wouldn't have been because of Omu, it would have been because of Guardian Animals, and because Guardian Animals was really good, and you wouldn't really, I don't remember Omu being in that deck. I don't think it was. Now let's talk to a card that I know wasn't in any decks. Professor Slate. This card is so bad. I mean, I've talked about how bad Slate is multiple times. So there weren't really any good synergistic cards that existed with Slate. You had Wound Prey that came out in Forged in the Barrens, but yeah, you had Rapid Fire, I guess, from the Rise of Shadows, which I guess is what they're going for, but that was terrible. There's just nothing to do with Slate. And then Slate was power crept twice. By one time by a card that is, 6 or 7 years older than Slate, which is insane. They printed Urchin Spines, which was a spell. It had the exact text, your spells are poisonous this turn, which is just better than Slate, because the only way you're ever going to make Slate work is if you played at the same turn as spells, because this card's never living. So it automatically worse than that card. And then they buffed Acid Maw from 7 mana to 3 mana. And Acid Maw's text reads, whenever an enemy minion takes damage, it gets destroyed. Now you might be saying, oh, but, you have to, or you can play spells with Professor Slate or some shit. But that's stupid because the only way to activate Poisonous is for spells to deal damage. So Slate is just directly worse than Acid Maw. This card is just like unreal levels of bad. I'm not sure what they were going for when they printed this card. It doesn't really make any sense, like, anything about it. Like, when you look at Scholomance, that set didn't really have any way to support this card either. So I don't understand it. It just doesn't really make any sense to me at all. So, I guess Professor Slate. That's all I really got. This card just baffles me. Then for Mage, we have Mazaki Master Duelist. This card is actually very good in both formats. When you had your Incancer's Flow at like 2 mana, you had your... What's it called? Your Refreshing Spring Water originally cost 4, things like that. Mazaki was actually genuinely very good in like a dedicated Mazaki Mage. You would play all these like super cheap cards. You would have your like Conjure Mana Biscuits to make Mazaki work, things like that. And it was actually quite good. It's a lot of play at a lot of different times in Standard and in Wild. It's seen a lot of play. It's just that nowadays, Mazaki is like directly worse than Ignite. You might be thinking, oh, how is that possible? How can Mazaki be worse than a 2-mana spell? Well, Ignite ramps itself, it deals damage itself, and then it's a lot easier to tutor because it's a spell. It's a lot easier to discount because it's a spell. And because it's a fire spell, if you play Sanctum Chandler, or I guess if you just draw through your deck, you can play Luna, it's just significantly better than Mazaki. It's really weird and awkward to say that, a 5-mana legendary with such a cool and interesting effect as Mazaki is just completely outclassed by a 2-mana epic spell, but it is, and that's really weird, if you ask me. Like, the only way to make Mazaki work is to play it with Sorcerer's Apprentices, which, why would you do that? Because you could just play Ignite. Obviously, like, that's rough. Mazaki only existed for a year before Ignite came out, so that's incredibly rough, but that happens. Sometimes that just happens. It's like the Slate and Urchin Spine situation, except Mazaki was actually a very good card before that. I would like to see Mazaki be buffed. I'm not going to lie. I think this card could be 4 mana. I think it could, and then you could, print some more effects that, benefit from your spell damage, like your Cram Session, I think it's called. That would make Mazaki a lot better, but I'm not sure what else you could do for this card. I liked Mazaki Mage. It's a lot more interesting than Ignite Mage, I'm going to tell you that. It's just so bad. It's so terrible. Trallian the Tenured. So this card sucks. Paladin, for this era, when Librams came out, it was Libram Paladin, Libram Paladin, Libram Paladin, Libram Paladin. There really wasn't anything else you would play in Paladin. Basically the entire year. Basically the entire, 2 years that Paladin existed in Standard, you kind of really only played Libram Paladin. It wasn't that good when it first came out, but in this exact same expansion, Penflinger came out, and Penflinger is a really good card. Same with Animated Broomstick, and then you had the Pure Paladin cards that came out in Dark Moon Fair with Yrel, and Yrel was fine. You didn't really have much support for it because the other Pure Paladin cards were from Descent of Dragons, so like Yrel was a bit awkward post-rotation, and it wasn't really that good, but Libram Paladin was genuinely incredibly powerful, and Big Paladin wasn't. Why they printed Trallian, I really couldn't tell you. It's not even like I'm not talking about the dual class cards, because I'm going to do that for my next video, but High Abyss Allura is significantly better as a quote-unquote big deck card than Trallian to a baffling degree. It wasn't necessarily a big deck, it's just the cards that you would play in that deck were, I don't even know, man. It's so bad. The High Abyss Allura decks were just significantly better, where you play them with, like, oh god, what's it called? Tip the Scales, I think it was called, and, that was so much better than Trallian. It's not big, I guess, but it's bad. Trallian is just a terrible card. I don't know what else there is to say. Like, Big Paladin didn't exist. Even if Big Paladin did exist, I don't think they would have run Trallian, because this card is really bad. It's like, genuinely so bad. Like, I don't know what else to say. Like, this effect is absolutely atrocious for an 8-mana card. Like, what? This should be, like, I don't know, like, a 5 mana 3/6 would have this effect. Not an 8 mana 3/12. Like, I don't know, man. It's something, alright. Then, for Priest, we have Mindrender Elusia. You know, we just talked about a bad card. We talked about a card that's been power crept. Talked about another terrible card. Now we're talking about a really broken card. Mindrender Elusia is really, really, overpowered on release. It was 2 mana, and it read, swap hands with your opponent until the end of until your next turn. Sorry. So what you would do is you would either play Elusia and then just play your opponent's combo pieces, and then they're like, damn, I couldn't play around that like you can like Dirty Rat or even Theotar. Theotar is easier to play around. So then they nerfed it to 3 mana, and it still did that exact same thing. It did. That wasn't that changed it absolutely nothing. But the other use case of it was when you played it in aggro decks, you could just make it so your opponent couldn't play the removal next turn. What? Genuinely what? It was so good at doing that role, and like, I don't even know. And the worst part is Elusia still saw play even after the nerf as just a little bit of like reload for aggro, aggro Shadow Priest, which is insane. That this card has seen play at all 3 instances, and this third instance is a bad card. It's not playable. It's not playable anymore. It's just really weird that this card was nerfed twice and was still playable. Like, I don't know what they were thinking with OG Elusia. That is like one of the most toxic cards ever printed. It was really good at exactly what it did. It was really good at the other thing it did. It's just so gross. I truly do not know what they were thinking when they printed this card. I mean, most people consider this one of their most hated cards of all time. So that should tell you just like, what were they thinking? For Rogue, we have Infiltrator Lillian. In Dark Moon Races, Nitro Boost Poison was released. So, that was about it. You know, you had Dark Moon Races, Nitro Boost Poison, like Stealth Rogue, and that deck was fine. And like, that's it. It didn't have any uses before that. It didn't have any uses after that. That exact one meta, Stealth Rogue, was pretty good. And then you would just play, you know, like Tempo Rogue, the next expansion, or Garrote Rogue, or, you know, anything else. So it's like, a lot of the teacher cards, you know, the legendaries of this expansion that weren't dual class is what I'm going with. Not Lillian or Selena or the last card on the list, which you all know if you know it's coming up. All of those cards are just bad. I mean, like, I don't know, most of these cards are not very good. It's really rough when this happens for a legendary collection where they're just overall pretty bad. It doesn't happen that often, but when it does, it feels quite bad. And like I'm saying, not Elusia. Lillian was really good in this one specific deck that existed for like no time at all. It only existed in Dark Moon Races because of Nitro Boost Poison, and you still had your Saviors of Old Doom cards that existed. It's just so rough. It's so rough. Stealth Rogue is one of my favorite decks of all time. I'm rambling about Lillian because, I mean, what more is there to say? It's 4 mana, 4/2 stealth, Death Rattle, summon a 4/2 Forsaken Lillian that attacks a random enemy. That's just a really good face card. Stealth Rogue was a face deck. It's just pretty good. I don't even have a meme for it. I just posted, you know, Infiltrator, the Pokemon ability, and then Seviper, because I like that Pokemon. It's cool. So that's Infiltrator Lillian. Now we have another actually good card in Instructor Fireheart. So this card is actually genuinely amazing. One of the best cards in the entire game during United and Stormwind. With your, you know, Questline Shaman and Elemental Shaman both ran this card, which is pretty crazy actually for a card to fit into 2 wildly different decks like that. Elemental Shaman, you know, generic aggro deck that was all about making your elementals cost less with Granite Forgeborn. Then you would swarm the board. You would play elementals a lot earlier because of cards like that. And then, you know, you would have your Instructor Fireheart as reload, and it was really good for that. You would get really good damage spells that existed at the time, like, you know, Storm Strike or Serpent Shrine Portal. You could get, I think Lightning Bolt was still in the game at that point. So you get like all these really, really efficient damage spells that could just help you end out the games. And it was just really good. You didn't actually care about any of the overload effects you would get when you're playing it in the aggro deck, because usually Fireheart was helping you end the game. So overloading didn't really matter. And then, of course, in Questline Shaman, you like to be overloaded. You liked it when you would get the 1-mana spells that would overload you from Instructor Fireheart, so you could keep the chain going, and you could keep getting more and more overload cards to complete your quest. It was one of the best cards at completing the quest, outside of Perpetual Flame, but Perpetual Flame was a really broken card, so that does it does help. Dude, Perpetual Flame on release is insane. I'm surprised that they made that card. 1 mana, deal 3 damage to a random enemy, overload 1, I think, and then if it kills to repeat, that card is insane. I don't know how it came out that way, but Instructor Fireheart, genuinely pretty good card. I think this card would see play if it came back to Standard, I'm not going to lie. Then for Warlock, you have Archwitch Willow. I mean, this card was 9 mana, it got buffed to 8, and it was kind of fringe playable, but then Darkmoon Faire came around, and then you just would play Ticketus in all your decks, and you don't want to pull Ticketus from Archwitch Willow, so you kind of just never played Archwitch Willow, and then Forging the Barrens came around, and you didn't really get much from that. But then and Stormwind came around, and you had Questline, and just there's no point to ever play Willow. It just rotated. This card just never had any real uses. It's not very good. I mean, people tried to make it work in Wild, and it was fine there if I remember correctly, but it's just not a good card. It's so weird because this card nowadays is just worse than Crane Game as well. Crane Game will pull 2 demons from your deck, but Crane Game also, benefits from Blood Bloom, so you can play it earlier on in the game than Archwitch Willow. So it offsets not having the 5/5 body. It's just such a bad card. A lot of these cards were just genuinely quite bad. Rattlecore! Yeah, I remember I said that most of these cards were quite bad. Ragor was amazing. Ragor saw so much play. It saw play in Big Warrior twice, because there's Big Warrior in this expansion and in United and Stormwind. It was just a really good control warrior, bomb that you would play in your Forging the Barrens, Darkmoon Faire, stuff like that. It's just a really good card. Ragor is just genuinely very good. It saw so much play when it was in Standard. It's not playable in Wild by any means, and never has been, but genuinely just playing Ragor just did so much for you. Your opponent couldn't clear efficiently, so even the 9/9 body was hard to clear. The 8/8 body was hard to clear. The 7/7 body was hard to clear. So it just kept having these hard to clear bodies. You could bump into things incredibly efficiently. You could just keep hitting your opponent in the face with big bodies that they couldn't keep clearing. And they would have to spend so many resources just to clear Ragor that it was genuinely quite good. Quite good doesn't even make up for it. It was genuinely really good. I mean, Ragor is just... it's incredible. I think this card could come back and be a playable card in Standard if you, obviously without Reno Lone Ranger, because it's Ragor and its effect is, Death Rattle dependent. But without Reno Lone Ranger, this card would probably be pretty good in Standard with the power level of Standard nowadays. That's how good Ragor was. It just does so much. It's such a gigantic value bomb card that, if you can cheat it out in some way, which I get is quite hard to do in Standard nowadays. You don't have cards that would be able to, but if you did, it would be really good. But yeah, that's going to be it for me. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what you think down below. What's your favorite teacher? I'm going to be doing the dual class cards from this, the legendaries from this expansion next, of course. So come back for that tomorrow. But yeah, that's going to be it for me. You can join my 2 giveaways. One is for members. You just join you can get emotes, you can get priority comments, things like that. It's like a Twitch subscription. Sorry, my brain is blanking. And then you can join my other one, where all you have to do is comment your favorite Hearthstone card down below. Make sure you're subscribed and to like the video. And yeah, that's gonna be it for me. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Darker than they've ever been.